Is God a polygamist? That's how I want to start the video. Um, this is kind of a weird topic. I don't think a lot of people really give much thought to. But if you really get down and think about what we say as church, I think a lot of church goers and people who are Christians say a lot of cliches out loud, and I don't think they really fully understand what they're saying. And I want to get into that a little bit. So one of the biggest things is the church will say, well, we are the bride of Christ. Okay, so basically, what does that mean? Because if someone's watching and maybe you're a new Christian or not a Christian at all, we do seem to get some of those. The Bible split up into sections. You have the Old Testament and the New Testament. That could also be Old Covenant and New Covenant. Another word for covenant is marriage. God entered into a covenant with Israel at Mount Sinai with Moses. And in that day they became the bride of Yahweh. So the Old Testament is all of basically Israel's history and in their covenant with God. But always what was promised throughout the entire Old Testament, even starting back in Genesis, is one day there's going to be a new covenant, a new marriage, if you will. So, are we basically, are these two covenants at one time ongoing, like together? Does God have a covenant marriage with Israel through the promises to Moses and that old covenant law which binded Israel, but also have another set of standards and covenant marriage with the church, with Jesus and everything? Well, that sounds absurd, and that would pretty much make God an adulterer, because he has two wives at two separate times, but Israel was his first wife, and we are a concubine, basically the church, which most Christians, of course, would be like, well, that's insane. I don't believe that. I would never, that can't be. Well, true enough, but based on many people's theology, that's exactly what they believe. So, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's, in numerous times, Israel was definitely going to be given a decree of divorce, and because of her harlotry. So in their law, that basically divorce is prohibited unless one of them becomes an adulteress. Then that decree of divorce is merited. So I don't know how many times, I'm not going to go through every single time that it's mentioned in the Old Testament, but constantly very derogative language is used towards Israel, basically calling her a prostitute, a whore, a harlot, because she constantly went after the nation's other gods. So there's parts in Ezekiel where basically he's saying, I found you in your youth, and I clothed you with all these beautiful things. I gave you all this wealth. I gave you this and that. And instead of, using these things to basically glorify your husband, Yahweh, you did it to attract other nations and their gods. And he basically looked at that as disgust. And I mean, this is the story over and over and over in the Old Testament. But he kept taking them back as a remnant. He would punish them. They would be attacked by another nation. There was the Assyrians, the Babylonians, certain quarrels with the Philistines and Egypt and all that kind of stuff. But so this was kind of their history. They would get punished, but God would take them back. But then when they would go do the exact same thing every single time, so especially when you get to the time of the prophets like Isaiah, especially in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, they start to look forward to another time when there's going to be a new covenant, a new marriage. So, just to back this up, I'm going to read a few things So it's not just me talking with my opinions and stuff like that. So first, Isaiah 1:21.
How the faithful city has become a whore, she who was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers.
Yeah. So basically, this is common language in the prophets of the Old Testament. Like, they were supposed to be a light to the world with everything that God gave them, but they became murderous. They were oppressive. They did everything the opposite of what they were supposed to be. And so, in Jeremiah 3, this is going to be verses 1 through 10, he's going to really lay into, how they were and what the outcome of that was going to be.
If a man divorces his wife, and she goes from him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her? Would not that land be greatly polluted? You have played the whore with many lovers. And would you return to me, declares the Lord? Lift up your eyes to bare heights and see, where have you not been ravished? By the wayside you have sat awaiting lovers, like an Arab in the wilderness. You have polluted the land with your vile whoredom. Therefore the showers have been withheld, and the spring rain has not come. Yet you have the forehead of a whore. You refuse to be ashamed. Have you not just called to me? Have you now just called to me? I obviously need glasses. My father, you are the friend of my youth. Will he be angry forever? Will he be indignant to the end? Behold, you have spoken, but you have done all the evil that you could. The Lord said to me in the days of King Josiah, have you seen what she did, that faithless one? I'm sorry. This is like small. Israel, how she went up on every high hill and under every green tree, and there played the whore. And I thought, after she has done all this, she will return to me. But she did not return, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. She saw that for all the adulteries of that faithless one, Israel, I had sent her away with a decree of divorce, yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear. But she too went and played the whore. Because she took her whoredom lightly, she polluted the land, committing adultery with stone and tree. Yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah did not return to me with her whole heart.
I mean, that works too,
but in pretense, declares the Lord.
Okay, so you see that there was going to be a time when Israel and Judah, which were the 12 tribes of Israel, were going to be written a decree of divorce because they kept playing the harlot with other nations and worshiping their gods, and were murdering and causing oppression of people. This is their history. Not everybody, of course. There was always a remnant of people, like Isaiah and Jeremiah themselves. They're calling their people to, turn away from what they were doing. So, but my point in all this is there's definitely a time when a divorce was coming. So, and my point of saying all this is there can't be a double marriage, because go to any church today, maybe not any church, but most, and they're going to say that we have a covenant with God and the new covenant through Jesus Christ. But also, Israel has a covenant with God through Abraham and through Moses and the old covenant. But as we see, there was coming a time where that was going to be cut off. It was going to be broken because you can't have two at the same time. So Jesus spoke about this all the time, like you can't put new wine into old wineskins. You can't have both. One of them has to be thrown out, and that's the whole point. Because he's using that analogy, like if you put new wine into anything, when it ferments, it expands. And if you put it in old wineskins, they're just going to burst and everything's ruined at that point. So, and he says, basically, he uses a lot of analogies of how that is. And so there was coming a time when the old was going to be thrown out and the new was going to be incorporated. In Revelation, there's a lot of talk about the destruction of the old and the divorce of the old, and then the marriage of the Lamb, and the marriage of the church and the bride of Christ, which is members of the old covenant community, but they can only join this new marriage if they joined the new covenant, which was promised to them all the way back in the law. This is not something that would have been brand new to their minds, but they weren't interested in it. They were happy with their ways, and it was causing destruction and oppression of peoples. So, in the Revelation, so this is in chapter 17, and this is the famous harlot in the Revelation. It says, "The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus." Okay, so if you go back to Exodus, he's explaining the attire of the high priests. They wore purple and scarlet, and on their forehead it would say, "Holy to God." But on this, he says, on their forehead is the mother of all harlots. So they were, and even in Isaiah somewhere, I forget, it says you have the forehead of a harlot. So they're not holy to God. They basically have a hard head, and they're saying we're against God and we're against our covenant husband. So in the Revelation later, there's the destruction of her and the divorce of her and the marriage of his new bride. So we see even in Revelation there's not two marriages at the same time. So basically that would make God a polygamist. He would have his first wife, Israel, and then his concubine, which would be the church. And this is what dual covenant theology or dispensationalism or Christian Zionism, whatever term you want to use, this is what they claim. I know they don't do that like on purpose, like they don't look at it this way, but that's the problem with a lot of Christians. They don't really look into their beliefs and what they're actually saying. The truth is, it was Israel that was the harlot and the adulteress, not God. But they are putting actually the blame on God, saying, no, he actually has two wives. He would never do that to Israel. Well, he did. Mm-hmm. And it's prophesied that he would. And that's a huge thing. So people will say, oh, we're the bride of Christ, we're the bride of Christ. Well, if he has a covenant marriage still with Israel, you're really not. You're a concubine of Christ. That's what you are. So that's what's going on. And that kind of causes a problem. And this is why I think a lot of Christians look to Israel with such, I don't know what the word, maybe they put it on such a pedestal, that's the apple of God's eye, that's his true bride, and he was with them first, and kind of like a mistress on the side. They kind of look at his main wife as with him, almost like jealousy, and they put her on a pedestal, like, why can't I be that guy? This is why they had to invent the rapture, basically. So they invented Well, when Jesus comes back, he's going to suck us up off the earth, and then he's going to go back to his original bride and reinstitute all these things, and it's just insane. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to come off a certain way, but I'm like this. We've made a serious mess of the Bible, and the reason that that's a problem is, as Christians, how do you know who you are in Christ if you have these kinds of views? Like, it doesn't. You're in a state of waiting, for thousands of years, and even that, it's a lot of people say, oh well, if the marriage hasn't happened yet, which most people believe, because it's in Revelation 19, that we're still waiting for the marriage.
Yeah, they say we're engaged.
Yeah, we're engaged, but isn't that kind of like, say I ask someone to marry me, but then I keep stringing along, like, oh, we'll keep switching the dates. Like, all right, well, we'll do it then and then. But for 2,000 years? I mean, that sounds pretty terrible. Like, we're being strung along while he's still kind of, like, married to his other wife.
That's what I'm thinking, because I'm like, I think they're trying to make it seem like that's better. Like, we're engaged while he's still married to the first wife. And I'm like,
it's worse.
If my husband was asking other people to marry him while he was still married to me, that would still be,
so
not moral.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, that would be not good. And, like, so basically, it reduces the church to a side chick that's kind of like sitting there waiting for him to be done with his first wife, and kind of just sitting here like, well, when is it going to be? And that's why they're like, oh, it's going to happen soon. It's happening soon. You sound like a desperate mistress is what you sound like, and that never leads to anything good. If you watch crime documentaries or anything, it's always bad. But
well, what does it boil down to, though? It boils down to what it was always supposed to, and that's faith in the Messiah. So no matter what your background is, if you have faith, you're his bride. It all comes down to Christ. In the old covenant, I mean, we just finished Isaiah, and the whole thing is like the gospel going to the nations, and it just being so, easy to just be in the kingdom, be in, be the bride, I guess, through faith, because you have the promises through faith, and it's not hard.
Yeah, so basically, if you read the Bible from Genesis to the Revelation, you will see a common theme that keeps on coming up time and time and time and time again. It's like two brothers or two wives, two this, two that. And these are allegorical to show, because the whole point of the Bible, it's even split up this way, is two covenants. And constantly the newer was to be more blessed than the older, which is very opposite of what the tradition was. The older would be the firstborn, and it would get all the blessing, but it's reversed. This is to show when the new covenant comes, it supersedes the old, because it's based on better promises. This is why on Hebrews 8, it talks about, he's quoting Jeremiah when he says, there's coming a day where there'll be a new covenant with new, better promises, all this stuff. But at the end of that, he says, calling this another covenant new, this other marriage new, the other one is growing old and becoming obsolete. So it's gone. It's not going to hang around for thousands of years. It's going to come to an end. And when the temple came down, it was over, never to return. That whole system of the ordinance of the old marriage was gone. So I want to read Galatians 4 I'm going to read this. So this is going to give you Paul goes into great detail about this, and I don't understand how people believe in certain beliefs that they do with passages like this, but maybe they just don't read it. I don't know. Paul's talking to the Galatian people because they are being Judaized. The Judaizers are coming in and be like, okay, well, yes, you can believe in Jesus, but you also have to basically become circumcised, go to the old ordinances of the old covenant or the old marriage. So they're trying to mix things and pollute it. So that's the context. So Paul says, "Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted allegorically. These women are 2 covenants. One is 2 covenants can also be these were 2 marriages, 2 covenants, promises. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. For it is written, Rejoice, O barren one who does not bear. Break forth and cry aloud, you who are not in labor. For the children of the desolate one will become more than those of the one who has a husband. Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so also it is now. But what does the Scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman." I don't know how you can possibly just kind of throw all that out, which, I'm sorry, but dispensationalism and dual covenant theology totally does that. They basically say Paul is a liar here. And I find that to be an issue because, and this, you run into this when Jesus deals with Jewish leaders at the time, because he says, they come back and we are not children of adultery. We're children of Abraham. They're saying, we have a covenant going all the way back then. We're not children of Hagar because that was done out of adultery. So, but Jesus says, no, you are your sons of the devil. And so he turns everything, back on its head. So they were actually not children of promise. So they were not going to be in that new marriage because they were playing the whore. Even at the times of Jesus, you see what they were doing with Rome at that time.
Right. And because he says the reason is because they didn't have faith in him.
Yeah, they had faith in Rome.
Because if they were part of the promise, they would have had faith in him. But since they don't, they were sons of the devil. Yeah,
and they had faith in Rome, is what they did, because they wanted to kill Jesus and John the Baptist. I mean, they did kill John the Baptist, but also, what's his face? Lazarus. Because he's like, if we do not kill these guys, Rome is going to take away our place in our nation. They had more faith in Rome and their security than they did God. They rejected everything that was being given to them, which was prophesied about all the way since Genesis.
And when Jesus was going to be crucified, Pilate was like, "This is the King of the Jews," and they said, "We have no king but Caesar."
Yeah. So they, once again, like always, were playing the harlot, and this is why in the Revelation they're given a decree of divorce. And I'm not even going to go into all the stuff in Leviticus that is important in the Revelation of like the penalty of a harlot whose husband is a priest. Like, she used to be stoned and burned, basically, which is a little harsh, but that's how it was. But this is not just for specific people. This is all dealing with a specific thing with covenants. So all of it had to do with Christ, and his covenant bride was Israel and Jerusalem. She played the harlot, and ultimately Rome came in and stoned them with their catapults and burned Jerusalem to the ground. This is the point. But a lot of Jews were saved out of that and became part of the new covenant because a remnant was to be saved. So we're not saying like, well, Jews were just cast off and now he turned to the Gentiles, which people like to say that that's what people like us believe. That's not true.
The majority of the early church
was Jews.
Yeah.
So it's like not that we don't say that, but or they like to throw out replacement theology. They love that term. I'm like, you guys are replacing the new covenant with Israel. That's what you're doing.
Right.
They are the true replacement theologists, but they don't see it that way. So basically, yeah. So the point is, in the big picture, I guess, because we're going to wrap this up, because I don't want this video to be another 40-minute video. So, you have the Old Covenant and you have the New Covenant. The Old Covenant was based on rules from Sinai and all these things, which Paul specifically says this is producing children for slavery, because at that point she became Hagar. In the New Covenant, there we are children of promise. But the old one was to be cast out like Hagar was with her son. They weren't going to be together. He wasn't, okay, Abraham was not still married to Hagar and Ishmael, and also, he wasn't playing both, which is what most Christians think today. But they think that God has his marriage over here with the church and all of us Gentiles, but also he has this other marriage over here that is his first marriage, and he is, still bound to this wife. So the point is, if that is the case, then God would be the one who is guilty of polygamy and not Israel. But it seems like today in the church, people will go through so much to boast about Israel and hold her up on a pedestal that they'll actually accuse God of harlotry before they'll accuse Israel of harlotry. Like, what's wrong with that picture? It seems like something has completely polluted what Christianity and the Bible is, which is a problem. So the Bible is very clear who the harlot is, and it's not God. It was Israel. So we need to take that to heart, because we don't want to play harlot also, because in a sense, we're doing the same thing that Israel always did. We're not turning to God and saying, well, this is our covenant husband, I'm going to stand with truth. No, we're actually looking to Israel for our security and safety. Listen to any of these politicians and pastors. They're saying, oh, well, God, if you turn your back on Israel, then God's going to turn his back on us. No, that is not the case. This is what Israel was always guilty of. Whether it be Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, they would look to them for their security and safety. If we turn our back on Assyria, if we turn our back on Babylon, and we stop paying them tribute and all the stuff and the money that they were paying them, then we're going to be destroyed, and we stand no chance. God was constantly calling them back. No, return to me. Do not put your faith in Assyria and in Babylon. But they kept doing it, so Assyria and Babylon would destroy them, the very ones that they would pay tribute to. And the same thing happened in the first century. We have no king but Caesar. Caesar came and destroyed them. Same thing happens all the time. So we need to take that to heart. Are we going to be like, oh, well, Israel, we have to keep giving hundreds of billions of dollars to Israel because God's going to curse us if not? Right. That's never, with God's people, that has never turned out real great.
Yeah, and I know somebody's going to comment and be like, Genesis 12, I will bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you, but you can see in Galatians again.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to read that in Galatians real quick, because anybody who does want to say that, then, sorry.
Galatians addresses it.
3:16, or, where is it? Sorry, I didn't plan on going here, but I'm going to go there.
Right.
3:27. For as many as of you who as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. That's not what I wanted to read, but that applies. 16. And he says, now the promises were made to Abraham and to his seed. It does not say and to seeds, referring to many, but referring to one, and to your seed, who is Christ. This is what I mean. The law, which came 430 years afterwards, does not annul a covenant previously ratified by God as to make the promise void. For if the inheritance comes by the law, It is no longer comes by promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. So he straight up says the promises were made to Abraham and to his seed, which is Jesus. Like, if you don't believe that, fine, then you don't believe in the Bible. Sorry, I don't mean to be that harsh, but it's clear what he says.
The whole Old Testament is pointing to Christ. The New Testament pointing to Christ. You know, one's pointing forwards, one's pointing back or present, and it's all it boils down to is faith in Christ.
Yeah. So I'm going to end the video here, but basically I'm going to leave it with this. If you are the bride of Christ, you are married to Christ in the new covenant in its full. If God is still married to Israel through promises of the old covenant in Sinai, then you are the concubine of Christ, and you're a side piece. I'm sorry, that's the reality of what it is. I mean, and if that's okay with you, you have other problems that
but the Bible doesn't support it. So no. If you believe that, that's fine, but the Bible does not support that view.
Yeah. I mean, I think this causes self-esteem issues. Like, if you're a side piece, I don't think you're too happy with yourselves. And I think that's why Christians want the rapture to happen, to get sucked off the earth because they're tired of being a side piece. But so that's what I want to say. So I don't believe God is a polygamist, but most of the church does, unfortunately.
Without saying it.
They unconsciously think that. So I'll leave you with that, and have a good day.